Welcome back to Traveling Dice. This is Jason. My Warhammer group recently met up for the second session in our Path to Glory campaign, playing Defend the Stones, the second scenario. And this is actually kind of a brutal scenario. It has a table set up which is 4 feet by 4 feet. In the center of the table, you have a circle which is 12 inches in diameter. One player is going to try to defend that circle while the other player tries to attack. Now, the defender is decided randomly. Both players roll 2d6. The higher roll is the attacker. In my opinion, and based on having played the games now, you are way better off being the attacker. It's not a guaranteed win by any stretch of the imagination, but I think it's a huge advantage. So the defender has to deploy all of his warband first, and then the attacker gets to choose which side he's going to deploy on. He can deploy on any of the 4 sides. So your opponent really is stuck in a spot where they're probably giving you a first turn charge because they're in the center of the table. You can deploy within 6 inches, but we have some mounted characters. We have some characters or some troops that are move 6. So a first turn charge is definitely not outside of the question here. So my first opponent and we roll off, and I end up being the attacker, which is just great. The victory conditions, there are no limit on turns for this particular scenario. And you win if you wipe your opponent out, or the attacker has the opportunity of winning if at the end of the defender's turn, they have at least 1 model in the circle and the defender has 0. The Path to Glory campaign is fought over 5 scenarios. The 5th scenario is a big multiplayer battle, and the victor of that 5th scenario ends up being the campaign winner. Your warband is led by a Chaos Champion, and your Chaos Champion gains powers as he gains the favor of his particular god, or of the various Chaos gods if he is undivided. My Chaos Warband is the most elite out of all the players. And in fact, I think it's a little bit of a hindrance going into some of these scenarios in retrospect. But looking at my warband from left to right, I have a Chaos Sorcerer who's a level 1 sorcerer on the lore of fire. I have a Plague Bearer. I have my Chaos Champion, Esmund the Foul. I have a Chaos Troll. I have a Chaos Warrior Chosen with Flail. And then I have a Chaos Warrior with Great Weapon. Now, my Warband Champion has already had several advancements. So in addition to being a similar starting stat line with the Chaos Warrior, he has Chaos Armor. He's on a Barded Chaos Steed. He has a shield and a Great Weapon. So the shield's only going to come into play for shooting attacks and ranged attacks such as magical spells. He also has a 5-up ward save. He started to become a demon. He has the Bestial Visage, which was a mutation, which has him causing fear. He has +1 attack and +1 toughness. And then based on one of my injuries, I have Frenzy because I suffered a level of madness. So that's a lot. My guy is really tough. He's really choppy. And I really am excited about the prospect of getting him into combat. Jumping over to my opponent's warband, his champion is also mounted on a Barded Chaos Steed. He has hand weapon and shield. He's got the throwing axe, which is actually really good. And he has some previous advancements as well. He has +1 strength, +1 toughness. The Soul Hunger advancement, which is giving him hatred, allowing him rerolls for combat attacks. Going from left to right, my opponent has a Chaos Sorcerer. He's a level 1 on the lore of metal. He'll take the signature spell during this battle. He has 7 Chaos Warhounds, 7 Marauders. I believe they had additional hand weapon. And he has 3 Chaos Warriors with great weapons. As the defender, my opponent deploys first, and I am really eyeing that sorcerer. That sorcerer has the potential of really taking down my champion because of the Searing Doom spell. The Searing Doom spell will cause D6 hits, and they wound at the target's armor save. So my guy for ranged attacks has 1-up armor save. So this is a huge problem and potentially can just drop my guy. I have a few options here. I can put my champion in with the troll, and what this allows me to do is put half of the hits +1 on the troll, which have 0 chance of wounding the troll because he's not wearing armor, and then count on my ward save, hopefully to save the rest, or just try to rush him up in there and hopefully get into combat, stay in combat, get into combat with the sorcerer ideally. So I kind of deploy with that in mind. It's a bit of a coin toss. Being in with a troll is definitely no guarantee. But I'm seeing these warhounds, and then I'm seeing that if I can charge those warhounds, that an over one would put me into the marauders, and the sorcerer's actually in a unit with the marauders. So this is kind of my plan, is looking at that charge. Those dire wolves are a really juicy target. So I deploy off on that side with some turn 1 charges in mind. So going into the start of turn 1, Esmund the Foul just gets right to it. He declares a charge on the Chaos Warhounds. And my opponent flees. And he flees through the Marauders, which, they have to take a panic test. And they fail that panic test. And they're running. Which, in retrospect, maybe this isn't great. I would have preferred to have tried to make a long charge against them. But both those units are running. So if the Sorcerer's unit doesn't rally, that's actually really awesome. And, could decide the outcome of this game. But Esmund the Foul does have a failed charge. I'm not going to be able to complete any turn 1 charges. My troll managed to pass his stupidity test, which is definitely no guarantee on the General's Leadership 8. My sorcerer advances up on my right flank. My thought is kind of take him over to that hill and hopefully be blasting stuff the whole game. My sorcerer has the fireball spell from the Lore of Fire, and I decide that I really want to focus fire on these marauders, hopefully take out the sorcerer and the whole unit. I throw 6 dice at fireball, and my opponent's unable to dispel it, which is great. I boosted it to the 3d6, and with 3d6 strength 4 hits, I only managed to kill 4 marauders, which is way below average. You would probably expect to kill 6 or so. So, I was hoping to wipe out that unit, but I only kill 4. It's a decent start. During my opponent's turn 1, unfortunately his sorcerer unit rallies. The marauders are rallied, they reform to face the action there. My opponent's champion maneuvers around outside of the circle, and he's threatening my left-hand flank. And then we go over to the magic phase. And, this is when I'm kind of holding my breath, because this is a really dangerous moment for my champion. And of course, he targets my champion, and he boosts it to 2d6. He rolls really poorly for the number of hits, which is a great start. And I'm just really crossing my fingers. I'm hoping that I can get hot on my ward saves. But unfortunately, Esmund the Foul is taken out at the bottom of turn 1. Going over to my second turn, my troll goes and fails the stupidity test, which is to be expected. He has to roll a 4 or less on 2d6, so he's just going to stumble forward an inch or two. My other troops, including my warrior with great weapon and my chosen with flail, as well as my plague bearers, start to move in to try to threaten the circle. The nice thing about this is the only real charge my opponent's champion is going to have is against the troll. The troll is by far at this point the thing I have that's most capable of fighting them, although he is going to really be hinging on those regeneration saves. I go and roll the Winds of Magic. I get a 3 and a 2. My opponent is able to channel, which is rough. I throw a bunch of dice at Fireball, and unfortunately it gets dispelled. Not a great start. On my opponent's turn, the Marauders start to make their way over to my Sorcerer. They're still a fair bit away, so I have some time to deal with those guys. The Warriors with the Sorcerer in the unit are just holding pat, the defensive position there. The Warhounds start to kind of make their way around the circle. They're going to harass something in later turns. And my character's champion is moving in position behind my troll. During the magic phase, my opponent targets my sorcerer with the Searing Doom spell, but fortunately I'm able to dispel it. During my turn, I feel like I have a few charges lined up. My chosen will declare a charge and successfully make it against the warriors with great weapons and the sorcerer's unit. Unfortunately, I was hoping my plague bearer would join in on that charge, but he fails, and the plague bearer failing gets in the way of my third charge, which was the Chaos Warrior charging the Chaos Warhounds to the north of the circle. So really disappointing here. Now granted, the Plague Bearer may or may not have made the difference. My opponent would have gotten more attacks. But, I really needed to bring more to that fight than I did. During the magic phase, my fireball is dispelled yet again. Now, the combat actually goes surprisingly well. My guy doesn't get killed, which is kind of a miracle. And I decided to put my attacks on the sorcerer, and I put 1 wound through on him. But the important thing here is that I have won the combat by 2, and my opponent's going to have to take a break test. If I'm able to break this unit and run it down, that's kind of a game changer. But unfortunately, my opponent's unit holds. So on my opponent's turn, he makes a bevy of charges. He declares a charge with the Chaos Warhounds against the Plague Bearer, charging him in the flank. My opponent's champion rear charges the Troll, which is horrible news. His other unit of Warhounds is making its way around the circle in the center and towards my Chaos Sorcerer, and the Marauders are also starting to close the ground on my Chaos Sorcerer. Because my opponent's Chaos Sorcerer is in combat, he can't cast the Searing Doom spell, which I don't mind at all. My opponent's champion beats the Troll, which isn't surprising, just via the static combat res, and the Troll breaks. He ends up running through all those combats in the circle, taking a bunch of dangerous terrain checks, and pops out the other side. The Plague Bearer, unfortunately, gets beat by the Chaos Warhounds. He gets killed, and this forces a panic check on my Chosen. And he goes and fails it. So he's running away. He's actually going to be running towards my Chaos Sorcerer. So things are going really bad here in this particular turn. My turn, I fail to rally the Chosen on a leadership 8 check, which is just devastating. He is continuing to run. He's right by the Marauders. He's in a rough spot. I try to tuck my Sorcerer in behind the hill to keep him as protected as possible. The Troll fails to rally, which honestly is to be expected. Again, leadership 4, and he just runs a few inches. And then we go to the magic phase, and my Sorcerer's winding up with a fireball. His life is kind of on the line here, and he managed to take out the rest of the Marauders, which, I've been working on these guys since the beginning of the game. My opponent's turn, his Chaos Warhounds and Champions start to advance on the hill, which my Sorcerer is hiding behind. His Sorcerer pops out of the unit and is moving towards my fleeing Chosen and Sorcerer. His Chaos Warriors do an about face and are making their way on pursuing the Troll. During my opponent's magic phase, he uses the Searing Doom spell to go ahead and kill my Chosen. I have the option of routing here at the top of this turn, but I decide not to. I really want to try to take out my opponent's Sorcerer and make him roll on the injury table. The Troll fails to rally and ends up going off the board. He is gone. I decide that I'm going to maneuver my Sorcerer up right next to my opponent's champion. So I'm out of his arc of sight. He won't be able to charge me with that guy. But I am targeting his Sorcerer with mine. We're going to have a little wizard's duel here. And I wind up and I throw 6 dice at Fireball. And I get a 3d6 Fireball. And those are my 2 wound rolls. And this guy is dead. So I'm actually feeling pretty good about this. Get a little bit of retribution for my champion. So although my opponent's Chaos Champion can't charge the Sorcerer, that's not true for the Chaos Warhounds. Now I'll actually have a decent shot against them. My opponent's Chaos Champion does maneuver around for a position of charge on a subsequent turn. His unit of Chaos Warriors takes a defensive position back on the circle. And we go over to combat. I manage to kill a direwolf. I survive. This combat's going to be a push because he gets 1 point of combat resolution for charging. So not too shabby. Go back over to my turn. Now again, a wise player would really rout at this point. My odds of victory are so low that it is just embarrassing that I don't rout. But I find it so hard to quit. And, regardless of the odds, I fight on here. And in the combat phase, I end up killing 1 more direwolf. I win that combat. And unfortunately don't break the unit. On my opponent's turn, he brings everything to bear. The second unit of Warhounds flanks me. His champion will charge me in the rear. And this is really spelling the beginning of the end for my Chaos Sorcerer here. So valiant effort on his part, but he does get killed in this combat phase. He's my last model, which means I get wiped out. And my opponent is victorious. My opponent is going to get just a bucket full of favor points, and I'm only going to get 2 for showing up. My opponent gains 2 advancements on his champion. He ends up getting +1 attack and +1 wound. A great game. If If you enjoyed this battle report and you want to see how we do in my other matches and the outcome of the campaign, please remember to like and subscribe. Bye for now.